So tonight we are here for the pawn. And is there anyone who feels more like a pawn than a person who lives with cats? I love my cats. I love them. And I sometimes think they love me. Particularly when they choose to sit on my lap, and at night when I'm in bed and my little kitty sleeps on my lap, or he curls up right here. But I'm starting to wonder about that because my sister-in-law, who lives in Bellevue, just installed heated bathroom floors. And her cat used to sleep on her lap, but now the cats are on the bathroom floor. And I've suddenly realized that me in my bed thinking my cat loves me when honestly I might just be a heated bathroom floor. Which is my version of pawn. Our featured storytellers, as I mentioned before, are a combination of self-submission and recruitment. Though this seems obvious, there are some possible changes to NEA funding in the pipeline. And so we are beginning to play with saying that the stories belong to the storytellers, and any story you hear tonight has been expressed to us as events from the storytellers' lives and as they recall them, and does not represent an endorsement from Story Night or reflect the views or opinions of Story Night, of which we have no views or opinions. So the point being, we are not promoting an ideology, whatever that means. So, good, we did that. All right, let's get our featured storytellers up here. He's trying to move off his square. Please welcome back Richard Rachman. And first up to the mic, this is her first time as a storyteller at Story. She's not likely to win a prize at a chess tournament, but she's still looking for cash. Please welcome Martha Channer. Let's get some handpan to bring her in.
Friendships, like life, are fraught with decisions. There are many moves that you have to make, whether you want to or not. I made some very epic failures in one friendship in particular, or so I thought. Many years ago now, I was in my teeny tiny little apartment in Chicago, and I was scrabbling desperately through my jewelry box because I needed to find something to sell. I was completely out of money. So, not my grandmother's pin, not the earrings I got for my birthday. My costume jewelry wasn't worth anything. So, what about Kitty's ring? Now, this was a ring that my friend Kitty had given me as a friendship ring, but what it was her wedding ring from her first marriage. So I put it on, and I never really wore it or liked it. It was a plain gold band with a little diamond, and it had always made me nervous. And I'm assuming that's because it was somebody else's wedding ring, right? So I thought, well, there's a pawn shop on Belmont Avenue in Chicago on my way to rehearsal. So, let's see what happens. At the time, I was teaching about 15 dance classes a week, and I was a principal in 2 modern dance companies, which I know that sounds glamorous, but actually, that vow of poverty had me slinging pizzas at a pizza place down the street 4 times a week. So, but I love dance. I still love dance. It was my bliss. It was my passion. So it was all worth it. The idea was that I was going to do my choreography, get funded, and do my independent work. So, what was one little gold wedding band, slightly used, to be sacrificed for this cause. So, pawn shops are not cheerful places. Not at all. I walked into this big, it was a cavernous place, and it was full of like old saddles and tarnished silver and mirrors. And I was kind of walking in with trepidation, and I looked around me and I thought, oh, maybe this wasn't such a bright idea to come and do this. But there in the back, way in the back, was this little window, and it said pawn sales. So I'm making my way through this, the grandma's china and people's broken promises in cabinets, and and I have to tell you, I felt absolutely ridiculous pulling this little teeny gold ring out of my pocket when like people's whole lives were in this place. So I plunked it down, and the guy took it and looked at it with his loop and, counted out $75, which I was a little disappointed with. I was hoping I would get more for it, but, I took the pen and I signed because, with a pawn situation, it is a loan. So if you choose to, you can come back and buy it back. But at that moment, I was pretty darn sure I was never, ever going to come back and get that ring. So I walked out in the sunshine and I stuffed the $75 in my pocket. I'm like, oh, good, now I can buy groceries at least. And, I was thinking, well, Kitty will understand, she'll understand. Well, she didn't. What do you mean you sold the ring? And I was like, She's like, I can't believe you did that. I would have given you the money. How could you do something like that? Well, I was a little stunned, and I didn't know what to say. I felt really creepy and low, like this was a low point in my life. So I just didn't say much of anything. And she said, okay, never mind. Just tell me where the place is. I'll go buy it back. Well, suddenly that ring meant a whole lot to Kitty. So that was a little baffling. And, I realized that I had failed her. And this was my first failure. So life went on. I was, I gave her the pawn ticket. And to be honest with you, I don't know if she ever went back and got it. Because we never spoke about it after that. So I continued dancing. I was dancing with my students. I was dancing at Orchestra Hall. I was having a great time. And, I still wasn't making much money and wasn't any great success. But I was racking up the achievements, and that made me feel really good. So I was pretty self-involved at that point, really focused on my career. But it was still really important to me to have and be a good friend. And at the time, I considered Kitty one of my absolute best friends. So I guess it was about a year later, we were coming back from having dinner together, and she was dropping me off in front of my apartment. And we pulled up alongside the parked cars, and we were just chatting with each other. And all of a sudden, we looked up, and there was this car coming straight at us. And I don't mean it was in its own lane. I mean it had its brights on, and it was coming at us head on. And we both froze for a second. And of course, being who I am, survivor, dancer, I sprung into action. And I'm grabbing and I'm throwing open the passenger door and going, come on, come on, come on, come on. And I get out of the car and go between the parked cars up onto the lawn there, onto the grass. And right as I turned back, the car just swerved and just missed Kitty's car. So I got back into the car, and I'm like, oh, can you believe that? What was that? And all of a sudden, she turned slowly to me, and she said, now I know who you are. You do? What's going on here? And she said, well, you left me for dead. I can't believe that you didn't like grab me and pull me out of the car with you. And I didn't know what to say. I don't know why I didn't either. I just didn't. And that was the second time I failed her. Only that time I felt really, really guilty because something really bad could have happened. So, you know, the third and final failure came with both a confidence and a betrayal. Kitty had gotten remarried about 2 years prior to that. And she called me up one night, late, which wasn't unusual. We talked all the time. But she confided in me that she was having an affair with her coworker. And to be honest, I wasn't completely surprised by this. I mean, Kitty was, and I'm sure is, drop-dead gorgeous. So she had like men flinging themselves at her all the time. You know, and she loved it. She loved the self-affirming attention that it gave her. So I said, does Joe, her husband, does Joe know about this? And she said, well, no, of course not. And I said, oh, okay. She goes, well, actually, I had, and I'm calling him Bob because I can't remember what his name was, Bob over for dinner the other night. I said, oh, really? You cooked dinner for Joe and Bob at your house? She goes, oh, no. I'm like, oh, Joe cooked. And I went, oh, my goodness. Oh, Kitty, this is how women get murdered. How do you think Joe is going to react when he finds out what's going on? And I got to tell you, I wasn't crazy about Joe. Joe was, well, you know, Joe was a lawyer, and I have nothing against lawyers, but he was really kind of aggressive and angry. So I wasn't feeling sorry for Joe. But, you know, as I said to her, well, you know, even Joe doesn't deserve to be cuckolded at his own dinner table, you know, which didn't go over well. I was a bad friend. I wasn't being supportive. I was judging her. I was taking Joe's side. And I wasn't responding to the dilemma. I wasn't being any help with the dilemma she was in. And so, you know, I felt terrible. But when we hung up the phone that night, I knew that something had broken in our friendship. I realized I just wasn't the person that she needed me to be. I wasn't the yes girl that was going to agree with everything she did. But that was very sad for me. So, you know, it wasn't until like years later, still feeling all that guilt, all that shame, all that guilt, I've been a terrible friend to her, that I suddenly realized I also had been an expendable object, that I had been positioned to serve in her game. So, wow, something just broke free in me, and suddenly I understood my moral limits when it came to friendship and betrayal. And I realized that I was still judging myself by where she had positioned me. So I made a decision. I decided I was going to be a very, very good friend to myself. And I was going to make all my own moves from now on, from that point on, for good or for ill. And I thought, well, with any luck, this little pawn in the game of life may eventually become a queen. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. that Bob really gets around, doesn't he? Watch out. Slinging pizza. I just wanted to see what that looked like. Because I was sitting behind, I couldn't see what Patty was doing. All right. This is my wedding ring. It's 24 karat gold. It is a family heirloom. And for many years ago, I worked on a children's television program, and we had an episode where there was a machine that made taffy, and this kid would say taffy, and a cannon would shoot pieces of taffy out of it. Well, there were thousands of pieces of taffy made out of these 1-inch square foam cubes. And off camera, if you weren't in the scene, you were recruited to be one of the taffy throwers. So we all had, like the crew had like 50 people, and including the performers, we were all standing around behind the camera with these giant bags of foam. And they yelled action, and we were throwing the taffy as hard as we could to get all this taffy so it just looked like the whole village was full of taffy. And then it went up on the floor like 3.5, 4 feet high. And they yelled, cut. And I looked at my hand, and my wedding ring was gone. I'd thrown the taffy so hard, and I was doing CrossFit. My ring flew off of my finger and was lost in the studio, and I thought I would never see it again. But a few hours later, one of the crew members, they'd cleaned the whole studio to reset the shot, and they found my ring on the floor, so it's with me here tonight, thank goodness. Yeah. He could have taken it to a pawn shop. All right, we're going to have our first slammer. This is a story that is 5 minutes in length. It is your story. It is a family audience. It is hopefully connected to the theme pawn. And if you run over time, we have multiple tickets. That's awesome. If you run along, you will see me kind of sidle up next to you as if I were another piece on the chessboard, and I was about to move in whatever way my particular chess piece moves to remove you from the board. I might be another pawn. I could be a knight moving in an L shape. I think maybe the most appropriate chess piece would be the bishop, moving straight in a diagonal from across. Does the bishop move diagonally? Does anyone know? Richard? All right, our first story slammer tonight, please welcome Jill Thomas.
Yeah, a little shorter than you. All righty, thank you, Jodi. So a couple weeks ago, I returned home to Atlanta, Georgia, to clean my best friend Eric's house. He and I have known each other for 40 years, and 10 of those years we lived together until he met his husband and moved out, which, broke my heart, but Eric's a slob, have him. So Eric has a lung disease that has progressed steadily, and he's tried all kinds of treatments, from massive doses of steroids to red light therapy, but nothing's helped. So his doctor's recent recommendation was that he get a double lung transplant. Eric decided not to do that because it would give him an 8-year life expectancy, and he told me he doesn't want to know when he's going to die. So when he said that to me, I, left as soon as I could and went home to him. When I got to Atlanta, it was worse than I thought. His house was filthy, and he was struggling to breathe, but it's okay. We just hung out on the couch and watched movies, and while his husband Pedro was at work and Eric was napping, I vacuumed the house and scraped dog drool off the walls, just like old times. we did manage to go out one night to a tiki bar, and we had umbrella drinks and caught up with friends and had a really good time. But afterwards, Eric was just exhausted. So Pedro drove us as close to the front door of the house as he could and dropped us off. And I helped Eric inside and sat on the couch next to him and just rubbed his back while he was doubled over, gasping for breath. He has an oxygen tank when this happened, so he finally, got his breath back and he was okay. But it's still horrifying to sit there as his best friend, not knowing if he was going to recover or if I had to call 911 or just get a shovel and start digging. So, and speaking of horrifying, while I was there, I went and visited my family, and my sister-in-law Beth just recently had her kitchen renovated, and so she invited some of the family to come over for lunch, and I was so excited because I thought, oh, finally I'm gonna have good Southern food like black-eyed peas and collard greens and some ham. No. All the appliances were brand new, and Beth didn't want them getting dirty. So she went to Costco and got angel hair pasta with shrimp and a cream sauce, cocktail shrimp, pasta salad in a cream sauce, and broccoli salad in a cream sauce. And if that wasn't crazy enough for you, my mother-in-law comes up to me, Joan, and she says, "So, are you enjoying your visit with your guests?" And I was just like, she's met Eric and Pedro. I've talked about them. She knows they're married, but she continues to call them roommates or special friends, and now guests, which is especially stupid because I was a guest in their house. And, normally I just kind of brush it off, like, she's older, she lives in the country, she doesn't know any better. But with Eric's uncertain health prognosis and the threat to marriage equality that they and many people are facing, I just couldn't be a pawn in her homophobic name game anymore. So I said to her, we've been having a real good time, especially because it's been Eric and Pedro's 30th wedding anniversary. And she did what I've had to do for so many years. She shut up and walked away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Jill's going over to sign our release, which also signs her up to be part of our cleaning service. We specialize in scraping dog drool off the wall. Yeah. So I had the special friend gave me this ring as well. 25 years ago. Yes, let's go to our next featured storyteller. Unfortunately, Story Night does not have the budget we've had in the past, so I would have loved to have created some kind of award because Richard has the distinction of being one of our most loved and most often sharing storytellers once every quarter in 2024, I figured out. Sometimes as a featured, which he can only do every 6 months, and sometimes as a story slammer. But we lovingly refer to him as our wandering ecologist, and we might have a little ecology in our chess story tonight as well. Please welcome back Richard Rachman.
I thought I was king, monarch, butterfly. But really, I was just a pawn. Now, I'm going to teach you a little bit about monarch butterflies. Jodi, I'm super sorry. I'm going to go into the nutritional details of peas. So, monarch butterflies are an insect. They're one of the largest butterflies in North America. They do this really splendid migration. The famous part of it is monarchs in the eastern part of the United States will spend the winter in central Mexico, and they cover the pine trees in these forests. It's like if you walk in there early morning, it's cold, and the monarchs are just coating all these pine trees. It's a really fresh scent. And if the wind bursts just a little bit, they'll puff out and fly a little bit, and then they'll fly right back to that same branch. Because their relatives have been doing that for year after year after year for thousands of years. They come back to the same trees. They're relatives. They have a short lifespan. But the monarch butterflies that we care about here in Boise are called the western monarch butterfly. Now, we may see them in the deserts and in Boise and in the mountains, but they spend their winter on the coast of California in some of the nicest, most expensive real estate. And so it's really important that because monarch butterflies aren't doing very well, they're becoming quite rare, we count them during this winter period when they're just hanging out on the tree, and it's easiest to count them. So we get out our cell phones and collect data, and we get binoculars, and we bring them to our eyes, and we count in kind of groups of 5, because sometimes there can be thousands. So you kind of have to count them in groups. And so I was asked to be the Los Angeles County coordinator for this count called the Western Monarch Count. And the way that it happened was the San Diego Zoo was the one that was looking for someone. And they reached out to a colleague of mine who's in water conservation. And he set up a Zoom meeting. He's like, Richard, we would really love for you to help be a volunteer coordinator. So you get volunteers, you teach them how to count monarchs, and we'd be able to collect data for Los Angeles County. We haven't had someone for a while. And I'm like, I don't know that much about monarch butterflies at all. I'm a botanist by training, so in my day work, what I would do is botanical research, but also I'd give plant tours to people and teach people how to identify various plants. I'd primarily work with women, queer people, foragers, people that use plants for like medicine or materials. And so that was my background, and so I explained that, and he's like, well, you talk a lot, you like talking, you have a big network, so I think you'd be really good at this. I'm like, well, I'd have to learn a lot, let me think about it. I'd give it some thought and come back to him like, yep, let's do it. And so I reach out to the organization that puts it together called Xerces Society, that is centered around invertebrate or bug conservation. I think that's sinking again. This has happened before. But if it gets worse, I'll let you know. But so I start doing this. And one of the things is I just delve into the scientific literature. I'm learning as much about monarch butterflies as possible. And so I can teach people, and I go out on these workshops and train strangers from around Los Angeles County, from Malibu, Santa Monica, down to Long Beach. And I have to work with a lot of different types of people, and I have to work with different organizations. Like I said, these butterflies like really expensive real estate. Some of the sites for monarch butterflies can be found like in Beyonce's property in Malibu, like on the trees in her backyard, or in the eucalyptus trees at Chevron Oil Refinery. So I had to train the biologists there. And then some places they like are kind of on the darker side, like in a cemetery. So one time I was out with an NPR reporter, and we go out to the cemetery in Santa Monica, and it's early in the morning, it's 6 o'clock, fog's rolling in over the tombstones, and there's this one just single patch of places where people are buried that's all wildflowers that are dead for the winter, but it's really beautiful, kind of like a green burial. And there's trees that act as windbreakers throughout the cemetery, and that's where the monarchs are. So we show the NPR reporter, here's how we use our binoculars, here's how we plug in the data. And we only found 7 butterflies. And so we're like, we're super sorry you came out here for this. I described it normally as like being like a Disney fairy tale princess. We were just like, oh my gosh, in a woodland surrounded by butterflies. And he left. And so we got a rumor of butterflies down the street. So my colleague and I took that rumor and went, and sure enough, we found hundreds. So we called them, we're like, we're super sorry, but we actually found hundreds somewhere else. So they fixed the news report to include that. But I was giving a lot of interviews. I had an entire piece in the LA Times written about me. I took the reporters down to a golf course where the butterflies were hanging out. And a bird during the interview was just murdering the butterflies. It was flying back and forth, killing one after the other. And I had to stop the interview for a sec and pick up handfuls of dead butterflies so I could send them off to a laboratory in Colorado for genetic analysis. One of the places the butterflies would go is this famous art museum in Pacific Palisades, which unfortunately just burned down. We might have lost that grove. But I couldn't get into this place. I didn't know who to talk to. I wasn't important enough. I wasn't one of the big players. And so they just like kind of ignored a lot of my emails. So I went looking for like, how do I get access? Who do I need to talk to? And the trick was one of these groups in Malibu of environmentalists that would advocate for monarch butterflies, the Malibu Monarch Project. Now, this was a group of retired elderly women, the type that would kind of show up to if they wanted to build like an apartment complex, they'd show up and be like, no, not in our neighborhood. They were well-meaning enough, though. So I had to play ball. I had to talk to them. I had to go, because they had access to a lot of these sites. But previously, their data was just being thrown out. They weren't really using binoculars all the time. They were just haphazardly counting monarchs. They'd show up, like, instead of 6 o'clock in the morning, roll around to like 11 or 12. So we just had to throw out their data. And they caught wind, and they were kind of annoyed by it. And so I start getting emails from the president, and she's very annoying. She's argumentative, know-it-all, emailing me at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm a volunteer coordinator, emphasis on the volunteer. So I'm not putting her up with this. So I passed it along to people that are actually paid. And I didn't have to deal with her, but I dealt with like people in her organization. And so I got access to a bunch of different places, including the art museum. But I was told, don't talk to anyone, don't like mess this up, like you're with us. I'm like, okay, fine. But sure enough, later, I was able to talk to people and I was able to get access. It's very protected, I had to be with a security guard, but to this art museum, so it was super fancy, a lot of security, but I was able to count the butterflies and there's thousands. It was so cool. They were not happy about this. So a year goes by, and I'm doing more training groups where I'm bringing people out to areas to count butterflies, use the binoculars, use their cell phones. I have to be public about this. I have to tell you where I am, at what time, and what place. And they weren't invited to this. They had been weird via email and upset that we were honing in on their turf. And so I go to the training seminar that I'm doing in Malibu. It was actually at a parking lot owned by the Walton family of Walmart fame. It's all these big players, right? It's early in the morning. Cars on PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, are buzzing by. It's cold. There's still some fog, morning fog. And my volunteers start coming in onto the black asphalt, wearing sweatshirts and hoodies and scarves, and they have their binoculars like they were told to. And about 10 of them are there waiting for this workshop to start. And up comes a car, and 3 elderly women bust out of it and walk right up to me, phones shoved in my face. Show us how to use the app. Show us how to use the app. One of them, I'm not even kidding, has a meat thermometer. I am floored. I was like, y'all were not invited to this event. Like, you have to show us, you have to. So I ignore them and I talk to all the 10 strangers that I have to give instructions on how to count butterflies to. And they're interrupting me at every time. So I walk away and they follow me. They start chasing me through this parking lot, demanding that I show them how to work their phones. And I'm panicking. I'm flush with heat. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna say anything to get them out of here. So I do. I say, fine. I'll give you a workshop. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. I'll do a private workshop just for y'all where I'll teach you how to count butterflies and use the binoculars, and it'll be great. You'll learn all about the cell phone app. I just need you all to leave immediately. And they're like, fine, okay. They get in their car and they leave. And then I have to go walk up to these strangers that are just like, what the heck just happened? So I go through the lesson. It's about an hour. And the sun's out at that point. And it's that brightness, that awkward late morning brightness. Everyone leaves. And finally the air can just escape from my lungs. I'm done, thank goodness. And so I grab my phone, I start calling the people from Xerces Society. I'm like, you will not believe what just happened. I almost had to call the cops on a bunch of elderly people. And she's like, I am so sorry you had to deal with that. Don't worry, we'll talk to them. This will never happen again. You don't have to deal with them anymore. Just anytime they show up, forward anything to us. And sure enough, they got kicked off the count, which was great. No bad data, no people chasing me in parking lots. And I continued on with the count for another year until I moved to Boise. But you're just this small scientist scrambling around this giant county in places you're not really supposed to be, counting these tiny little butterflies. And it just really makes you realize how small you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. There's a phrase that keeps following me around. When the stakes are low, the drama is high. Not that counting monarchs have low stakes. I'm not saying that. And it's amazing, too. I feel like I've heard about these Malibu monarch people showing up at our city council meetings. Like, it's very strange. All right, this is the part where I typically ask our guest musician if they would play some insurance music. Yeah. Great, thank you. This is a message from our sponsor, our season sponsor. Yeah, that feels secure, and I'm sorry I interrupted it. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I haven't even started the message yet. The pawn, small, steady, and stronger than you think. While others command attention, the pawn moves with purpose, steadily advancing and setting the stages for victory. Underestimated? Maybe. Essential? Always. At Keenly, we know a thing or two about being underestimated. As a boutique benefits agency, we're not the biggest on the board, but that's exactly our advantage. Agile, strategic, and fiercely dedicated, we design forward-thinking benefits, programs that make you the employer of choice. Our favorite? Community-based health plans with $0 deductibles. We move with purpose, helping you take care of your team with smarter benefits so your business can thrive. Because in benefits, as in chess, it's not about the size, but strategy. It's your move. Make it Keenly. All right, if you didn't get a chance to before the show, we're going to take a break here in a moment so you can have a chance to refresh drinks. But also out in the lobby, in this corner over here, our friends from the Play Studio here at Jump have set up a display from StoryCorps. This is a program that plays every Friday morning on NPR, and it's people interviewing people, peer interviews. stories, really, but done in an interview style. And the examples that are on the monitors, which you can put headphones on and listen, are really fun, edited productions that StoryCorps did where they added animation to people's stories. I've seen a couple of them before, but it's cool to have them here in the building. But what's also very cool is you can go onto the Jump website and make an appointment for two of you to be down on the 5th floor studio in like a podcast suite, and you get to spend an hour interviewing each other just in focused conversation, and then they submit that to StoryCorps, and it gets cataloged by the Library of Congress. So somewhere down the road, maybe one of your what would it be, your progenitors, your future, you're their ancestor. Am I using any words that make any sense? Your descendants, your progeny. What is a progenitor? I'm gonna have to look that up later. I might have said something nasty. They'll be, gosh, I wonder what they were up to in Boise in 2025. And the Library of Congress, well, they recorded this interview. Here you go. So you have that in the lobby. We're going to be back in about 10 minutes. So Dave's going to play some more music here from the stage. Please enjoy your break, and we'll be back for more stories. And welcome back to Pawn, our second act. I was really happy to hear our first slammer, Jill, include peas in her story. Did you hear that? She talked about black-eyed peas. I'll take it. It's part of the pea family. Is that true? Wait, it is, okay. I realized I had a botanist behind me, so I had to... I know it's named a pea, but maybe it's not actually a pea. Kind of like... Isn't there something called a nut that's not a nut? Well, puzzle on that one for me. All right. It's not too late to sign up to be a story slammer. We're going to include several in this next act, so please feel free to go to the booth and put your name in. In fact, we are going to start this act with a slammer. So let's have that slammer basket back up here. Last month, our theme was ROOK. And I did think that was maybe a more difficult theme for people, to talk about the rook in their lives. But I imagine there are many more people who feel like they've been used in their lives. So, or maybe they've been to a pawn shop. Let's see. Thank you, Natalia. Ooh, the handpan can be suspenseful. Our next storyteller is Ariel Carter. Come on up.
I have a timer set up on my Fitbit watch so that I don't go over. All right, so my story, I want to start off by saying the poor pawn. It is usually the first piece that always bites the dust in a chess game. But I also think it's the piece that has the most potential, right? As it's going across the board, dodging all obstacles in its way, it has the ability to change into anything. Most people choose the queen, but you can also be a knight, a rook, a bishop, whatever serves you, right? And I want to take that concept and apply it to the change that happens in a parental relationship with their kid. More specifically, my relationship with my mom and how that changed. First, I love my mom, right? I will tell everybody she's the one who gave me my heart and my moral compass. But, as most parents know, the road of training and teaching and growing up a child is not easy. It's not smooth. By the time I turned 16, my mom would tell me my eyeballs rolled to the back of my head and stuck there. I moved out of my mom's house. I moved in with my dad, and for a few years, we didn't have much of a relationship. I saw her for maybe holidays and birthdays. At the age of 21, I bought a house with a boyfriend. Don't ever do that. Worst mistake I ever did in my life. Ended in a lawsuit. So I was with that person for about a year inside the house, and that's when we broke up. And when you have a mortgage in your name, this massive debt, you can't rent. You can't apply for apartments. What do? You move back in with your family. And eventually I moved back in with my mom. During that time, we grew a lot closer. We started to find similar hobbies that we enjoyed, including wine. Oh my goodness. The amount of wine I bought and spent money on for a couple of years is pretty bad. Also, for any parents out there, don't ever judge your kid for spending money on games and toys. If you enjoy spending money on nice food and drinks, at least their toys last longer. And while I was spending a lot of money on things, I also decided to go back to school, and I was working full-time as well. So I started saving all this money up. I was figuring out my life, and because I was having fun, I started spending on things that my mom, I started spending money on things that weren't really high priority, like tattoos. I have 8 tattoos and a leg sleeve. I think at the end of my excursion, it was about $3,000 to $4,000. During this time, let it be known, I was paying rent. I was my own person. I was paying my bills. I was more of a roommate situation with my mom, not necessarily a child underneath a parent. She didn't necessarily agree with me. For her, I was still her child. And in her eyes, I was making poor life decisions. This ended in a huge argument between us, where she actually kicked me out of the house. And I was 25 at this time. I was still dealing with the lawsuit with the POS X off to the side. This was happening around COVID time, so trials were a little bit of a mess back then, and the process was long. And I moved in with another family member. That didn't go so well. And I was feeling so alone. My support system was gone. And so I decided to change who I was as a person. I put myself in uncomfortable positions to grow a support system. I started joining the Meetup app. I started hiking. I started putting myself in these situations to interact with more people and be friends. One of those really lovely activities was hiking. I lost 100 pounds while doing it, and I met a wonderful group of people that would go outdoors with me. My mom would see my social media and saw all the hiking I was doing, and she reached out to me, and she wanted to come hiking with me as well. So at that point, we started to slowly build up our relationship again. But this time, not as mother and daughter, but more as friends. And I have to tell you, she is my best friend now. I can go to her about anything. And we still have our conflicts, right? I mean, the mother-daughter relationship still happens. We still have our arguments, but they're no longer arguments between a mother and a daughter. There's not that power dynamic that happens. It's more of a conversation between two people who want to understand each other and communicate better. She has allowed me to live my own life and experience my own life. And now I am my own piece, changing and growing who I am. Thank you.
That was great. It's been a while since I've heard someone describe their hobby as wine. I like it. Also, talking about how wine, spending money on food and drinks, it's gone after you've spent it, and buying something more permanent. I wasn't thinking about tattoos. That's pretty permanent. That's a long time. It reminds me of a show I was in where I was working the crowd, and this woman came up, and I noticed she had a tattoo on her wedding finger. We've been talking about rings tonight. I was like, "Oh, you have a tattoo. Does that symbolize a wedding?" And she was like, "Not anymore." Well, you have the tattoo. That definitely lasted. All right, as I mentioned, our stories are a mix of self-submitted and recruited. Occasionally, it happens that after we've already set the show, I run across a story that I feel like, wow, this really seems great for this theme. This happened while I was listening to our friends at CityCast Boise. They had a person on their show that they interviewed, and I thought, this would be interesting to have presented at PON. So this isn't a featured story. We call it a guest story slot. It happens maybe once a season, and tonight is your lucky night because it's happening tonight. Please welcome Pam Hemphill.
Hello. It was 2020, and I had heard from the governor that there was a lockdown happening, and I didn't know, all those lights, excuse me. There's so much to my story, bear with me. I had heard that they were requiring people to wear a mask and all kinds of stuff was going on. But let me back up for a minute. I had retired as an alcohol and drug counselor, and I was bored. So I started going out and videotaping events that were going on in the city. My first one was a Second Amendment rally that was going on. And I found it very interesting to be able to just do that. I think that should have been my job. I loved it. But I go home and I'm on Facebook and I hear this man talking about the lockdowns, and his name was Ammon Bundy. And I didn't know who he was because my life that I've been spending was with studying addiction and trying to help addicts and heroin addicts get clean and sober. But I no politic background, wasn't interested. But I heard what he was saying and it scared me, and he invited everybody to his first meeting. And not having any information about him, I heard something about him. I went there to the first meeting, and this person was carrying a Bible and talking about the government was overreaching, and the other party was trying to, they were communists and they were trying to take over the nation, and it scared me. And the people that I was listening to, 2 PhDs, very spiritual, very religious, and why would they be lying to me about anything? So I followed Ammon Bundy for about a year until it ended right before the election when they went into St. Helens Hospital, St. Luke's, I'm sorry. And I got mad at them because they weren't wearing a mask. And I said, you go inside of a hospital without a mask, that's not okay with me. You're crossing a line that I will not cross with you. And other events that they had done was not okay with me. I didn't like going to the governor's home and protesting in front of people's houses. I didn't think that was right. Now, we want to stand up for our Constitution, we want to stand up for our rights, but we don't want to stand up where we're hurting somebody else's rights. So it ended, and they got mad at me, and I'm yelling at them, get out of this hospital or put a mask on, and they're screaming at me, and that's how I ended up with the reputation that I was an FBI informant. But and all kinds of things. So then within the same period of time, the election happened, and I'm so nervous, I'm sorry. Try to calm myself down. The election happened, and I had found out that I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I went in and had surgery. And my brother called me and said, you've been running around doing these videos all the time, political videos. How would you like to go and see Trump on January the 6th for his last speech? And I said, I would love that. Go to Washington, and I could see the White House, I could have fun. That would be great. Because all the protests I had been to, especially in Boise, are always peaceful, except for I was involved too, videotaping the Black Lives Matter one. So I went there, it was January the 6th, and I got up too late because I'd been on medication. And got there about 10:30, and I couldn't get through because the crowd was too big. And I had had surgery and I had stitches, and I didn't want somebody to hit me accidentally. So I started walking around and I said, what's going on next? Because I missed Trump. I couldn't videotape him. Well, he's going down to the Capitol. And I said, he's going down to the Capitol? Why is he going to the Capitol? He just had a speech. Then I thought, well, maybe he's going to be meeting with Congress. I better get there before everybody else gets there. So when I got in front of the Capitol, I ran into the Proud Boys, and I stayed with them for about a half hour, an hour, walking. I'm not on the side that you see in the Capitol where the media is talking about all the time. I'm on the other side. It's just as violent, but I'm on another side. I went up front to make sure I could be there before Trump got there, and I turned around, I don't see the Proud Boys. Well, I know now they left and went around to the other side of the Capitol. But I'm there, and William Dunphy is talking to an officer and says that we're negotiating. They're going to let us up to the steps. And I said, we're going to let us up to the steps? Wonderful. I can be really close and videotape. So, but what happened, they were lying. The barriers started getting pushed. I'm thinking they're letting everybody in. You know, like you're at a football game or a concert, and you try to get in, and they're going to let you in, but everybody's pushing. So the officer pulled me over, and I thought, okay, he's letting me in first. And so I go around telling everybody, come on in, it's your house. I had an Ammon Bundy. And my heart, when I went over to the officer, and I said, why aren't they coming in? And she says, they're not letting them in. I said, oh my God. My heart went to my feet. I said, I'm in trouble. Thank God nobody broke through the barriers. But they put me back to the same side. It happened within a minute. They did it again. I ran to the captain. I said, I don't know what to do. I have stitches. The crowd is insane. He says, go to the officers on the steps, and I'll tell them to put you behind them. So when I got to the steps, they pushed me down. They stepped on my head. They pulled my shoulder, cut my knee, and broke my glasses. I was not breathing. If it wasn't for the Capitol police officers that day, I would be dead, definitely. They pulled me behind them, and I stayed there for about 20 minutes. And then I saw people coming in and out of the door, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get up there. I want to go in, but I'm going to make sure that the officer that's standing there is saying we have permission to go in. And I got shoved in. And once I got shoved in, I sat down. And then they're trying to get everybody out. I ran across the room, sat down again, and officer came to me and said, are you okay? I said, no, don't put me back in this crowd. They're insane. Get me out of here. So he did. And then I walked around back to the Capitol, and that's when I met Jacob Chansley. He was called the Buffalo Man, and videotaped him. Fast. Then I get back, I'm scared, I'm hearing everybody's going to be arrested. 8 months goes by, and I think now because I was going under chemotherapy that they didn't arrest me until later, and I was arrested. I was sentenced to 60 days in prison. And I have no criminal background, a couple of speeding tickets a long time ago. And I pleaded guilty because I am guilty. What happened, they started using me as a pawn. The DOJ is weaponized against this I'm 67 at the time, I'm 71 now. This 67-year-old woman, and they compared me with Hunter Biden, and I got mad. I said, don't compare me to nothing. Don't say the DOJ is weaponized against me. I was guilty that day. I broke the law. And Trump made a comment and said, horrible. So I responded, not knowing that the media would pick it up, and they did. And I decided a year and a half ago to stand up and share my story and tell people that no DOJ was weaponized against me. I broke the law that day. And I decided recently that I would not take the pardon. I'm the only one that isn't. Well, I think there's one more maybe, because it would be feeding the narrative that I don't believe in, that I'm not a victim that day. I was a volunteer. I chose to stay. Nobody made me stay. And there's more to the story, but I just feel in my heart, this is my amends, my way of making amends, because until I can meet the Capitol Police officers and give them a hug and tell them I'm sorry for ever being there that day, you are the heroes, I will continue to speak out. And so far, the whole world has heard my story, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much.
you, Pam. So when I first spoke with Pam, she's like, well, honey, I have to get off the phone because Japan is here to talk to me, and following that, it's the Netherlands. So her story really has spread. But as Richard said during our story salon, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, it's one thing to hear it on the radio, and it's another thing to be in the room with it. And that is something special about our story salons when we get to share stories together. Who wants to follow that story? Fortunately, I'm going to give a little space by reading our second sponsor message. I don't know what kind of music to ask for. Do you have something that sounds kind of like stones and boulders? No. All right. There we go. At one stone, every high school student is like a pawn, full of potential, ready to push forward, and capable of transforming into something greater. With bold moves, creative risk-taking, and unwavering support, our students don't just follow the game, they change it. At one stone, you're not just part of the game, you're a strategist, a leader, and a game changer. Thank you to One Stone for being a show sponsor tonight. All right, let's get that slammer basket. The other thing in terms of our chess metaphors, what struck me about Pam's story is that she's the pawn that went across the board and could have been transformed into something else and just said, nope, I'm a pawn. Unless someone else wants to put a ticket in during the show, then you'll have to hand deliver it. We'll see. All right, let's bring up, looks like Jaden Eller. Jaden. Yeah? Oh.
Hi, everybody. This story is going to be called A Pawn of Nature. This is my personal experience going through a crazy event in life that happened. I've actually performed this story in sign language more times than I have in English, because I'm currently an interpreting student to become an interpreter in the future. So it'll be kind of cool doing it in English. I'm just really used to doing it in sign language, so it'll also be cool to have the interpreter do it as well here. So, all right. This story takes place about 5 to 6 years ago. I believe it was 2018. My family decided it'd be super fun to go to Hawaii for Christmas. And it was kind of a weird time to be in Hawaii. I grew up in Washington where it always snowed. And so it was like, okay, sure, let's be in somewhere tropical for Christmas. All right. So we went, and Christmas morning we woke up. My parents woke us up. We were super excited. My sister and I were like, okay, what are we doing? Because my parents said, we're not doing presents. We're just doing Hawaii, and that's it. We're doing this trip. It's gonna be fun. Let's go. And so we woke up, and they're like, we're going on a hike. It's gonna be great. And we were like, okay, hike on Christmas morning? We've never done that, something like that before. Usually we're like in our pajamas, but sure, let's go do that. So they bring us up. The drive there, it's this hike on Maui that's super famous, but the drive is horrible. I mean, you're on this super small road going through, driving up. Rocks, and you're on cliff sides the whole time. It's pretty terrifying. But you get there and you get to a parking lot. It's like 3 parking spaces. We're like, all right, well, we're here after that, and let's go. We're ready. So we start hiking up the mountain, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's through a bamboo forest, so it's supposed to be one of these super famous, like touristy, all the tourists go there because it's super fun. And we're walking through, and we're going up, and we get to the bamboo forest part, and it's beautiful. The bamboo that grows in Hawaii is about, I would say, as tall as from the floor to this ceiling. It's huge. But you're walking through, and at the top there's supposed to be this waterfall, but we're going up, and we get to a point where there's a huge cliff on this side, more forest on this side, and there's this fork in the road, and the path goes 2 different ways. And so we're kind of like, well, this is interesting. We don't really know where to go. And there's a sign on the left path that says, danger, this is not a path, do not walk here. And I don't know if it was just Christmas Day or like, I have no clue. But for some reason, my mom and I turned and looked at each other and at the same time went, that sounds fun. Don't ever do that at any point in your life. And my sister and my dad were both like, no, that's not a real path. What are you doing? And my mom and I are like, I think we can figure it out. Like it looks like a path. It looks just like the other one on the right, but it's just on the left. Let's go. And so my mom and I split off. My dad and sister said, you're crazy, we're going the normal way. So we start going, we're walking through, and so far it's good. It's a dirt path through the jungle. It is a little scary because there's a cliff. If you look out over here, that's a great idea of how high the cliff was, this building, but if you're on the ground. So that's how tall it was. It was a big cliff, but we're going through and we're like, this is fine, like we're doing great, hiking through, this is perfect. And then we get to a part where there's no more path, like the sign said, and it's just a river. And we're like, this is fine. Like, this is gonna be small. It's starting to curve, so we can't see quite where the path goes. It's more river, but we think, we're strong swimmers. Like, we can wade through a river. At this point, we're like, we're not turning back. So we're going through, and at first it's just at our ankles. We're like, oh, it's shallow. Yeah, we're good. And we're walking, and it gets to the point where it's at our knees, and we're like, okay, this is a little more scary. And at first it was more like a creek, like nice and calm. But then it's kind of stirring up, and it's getting a point where you're walking like this. Like if any of you have ever been in a pool or anything like that where you're trying to walk through water, it's hard. And then all of a sudden, my mom's way ahead of me, probably as far as that first empty chair right there, and if I'm right here. And we're going through, and I see this splash. And I'm like, well, that's a little weird. It's not a wide river. It's maybe a little less big than this stage. And so I'm like, is there fish in here? Like, we're on kind of the top of a mountain. Like, that'd be a weird place for fish. And all of a sudden, I see something fall and splash. And I think, where did that come from? And I look up to the cliff that's as tall as that building, if you were on the ground, and see a rock about this size drop. And then I see about 10 more, and instead of being in front of me, they're right where I am, and they're actively falling. And I turn to my mom, and I scream at her, Mom! And at this time, I was like 15, 16. So I'm old enough, but I'm still a young teenager. And my mom, who's in front, hears me, turns around slowly, like dramatically, like if you're in the movies, and goes, run. The most dramatic voice I've ever heard. And I was like, this is the best advice you have? Like, this is what I'm supposed to do? And she starts taking off, and I'm like, okay, you're not gonna come back and help me, all right. But we are in water, and I'm thinking like, yeah, I guess there's no better solution. So I'm running. Rocks size this big falling from a cliff that high will kill you if they fall on you. So I'm running, and it's falling all around me. And finally, we get to we're going around the curve, and we see the rest of it. And there's still the river, but at the end, there's this patch of land. And I'm like, okay, if I can get to the patch of land, I can actually run. Because right now, I'm in knee-high water. Like, I can't run through this. And so we get to that. Somehow, by some miracle, we did not get hit by the rocks. And we were like, okay, this is great. We're good. Bad idea, but that's okay. And we get to the point of the waterfall. Oh, shoot, I'm only like halfway through. Okay, I'll speed this up. Sorry. I'll speed this up. We get to the waterfall. My dad and sister are there. We're like, oh, hey, guys. And they're like, how was the other path? And we're like, it was fine. We almost died, but we're good. We made it here, right? And so we're admiring the waterfall for like 5 minutes. We're like, okay, let's go back down. We start heading back down. We're thinking like there's no more danger, right? We're not in the area where the path was, the dangerous path. We're going on the normal path now. And we're going back, and the wind starts picking up. We're like, it's really windy, like extremely high winds. We're like, that's a little weird. But we're all good. Like, I'm sitting down eating a snack, and then we turn, and we hear this creak, like when a door slams in the middle of the night, like, and we're like, that's really weird. Is that just the wind? And then we see a tree taller than the size of from the floor to the ceiling, fall, just right on the path. And this time, my dad's near me. And I turn to my dad slowly. And my dad looks at me and goes, run. Second time. And so we're running down, and we're going through the bamboo forest again. And I don't know if you've ever heard bamboo in the wind. It is the scariest sound you will ever hear in your life. And bamboo's very flexible, and it's as tall as the ceiling. So it's coming down, it's nearly hitting us, and it's flexible, so it's going around, but we're worried we're gonna die. And I've been a believer my whole life, but let me tell you, the way I prayed that day, like, please, I gotta survive this. I cannot die.
We're glad you survived.
I survived. We're good now, but that was how it was a pawn of nature. It was crazy.
It's hard to run when you're a pawn. You can only go one space at a time. Pawn of nature. Actually, Jaden, I find it interesting that you usually tell that story in sign because for our radio and podcast listeners who could not see this performance, the cliff was about the size of an 8-story building. The bamboo was about 20 feet tall, and the distance to the front row is about 10 feet. So insert those distances into those references, since you couldn't see. Wow, run! Okay. Let's see who else we got in here. Next up, aha, this is our host from the late night series. Please welcome Beth Norton. To the flagship stage.
Okay, so when I was 7 years old, I lived with my aunt and uncle and cousins in a small military house in South San Diego. And it was never a very happy place to live. It was pretty abusive. When my uncle finally moved out, him and my older cousin wrote a letter to Child Protective Services, and they came and took me away. The crazy thing about this was my uncle was my biological uncle. And as an adult, I went and got a copy of my records, and I read the letters that they submitted. And I realized that it wasn't really about my safety, that their calling of Child Protective Services was an act of retribution to hurt my aunt. And it worked. I remember the day I was taken, she was very hurt. And I was dropped in a temporary housing facility where I knew no one for days. And it was the most terrifying moment of my childhood, in a childhood of terrifying moments. So that's that. I live now in an apartment down by the river with my 2 cats, and I am a pawn in their life as well. And it's a beautiful apartment. I have a little patio with a sliding glass door and a big window. I get lots of natural light. I've lived there for 6 years, and the apartment building is managed by the housing authority, and I'm in market rate housing, which just means I can afford it, which is great, and it's probably what's kept me here in Boise so long. I love my neighbors. They're all like seniors, elderly people, people on fixed incomes. There's a couple small families in our apartment complex. Mostly we all just kind of let each other live, and we're polite. Everybody has small animals, and we're very neighborly and friendly. And the building was probably made in the 90s. It's actually pretty nice. Like, the walls are pretty thick, so you can't really hear people. But I did live below a small family. And over the course of 6 years, I listened to a child upstairs grow up. I heard their steps go from toddler steps to an older kid's steps. And I heard their voice develop into, one of an older child. And I didn't really know who this family was. I just didn't really cross paths with them. very often. We must have, come and gone at different times. And it was a couple years ago when I started to hear things through the walls. Sometimes when kids are, being disciplined or they're not getting what they want, they scream and it sounds like they're being abused. You can turn the corner at a grocery store and be like, what's happening to this kid? And he's just throwing a fit, right? Because he didn't get the thing he wanted or something. And so there was times when I would hear, crying and screaming, and for a while I was just like, this is just normal kid stuff, probably. And then the screaming got more intense and more frequent, and there was something in my body that was telling me that this didn't really feel right. But I had some doubts because of my own experience. I wasn't sure if I was hearing things. I didn't really know what was going on, and I was conflicted on what to do. I remember one time it was so bad I actually went upstairs and I stood in front of the door with my hand poised to knock and could not find the courage, and I went back downstairs. And then one night, the screaming was really bad, and I heard the child say some things that were undeniable, and I decided it was time to call. So I called the Women and Children's Alliance, and they made it really easy. They were like, you can call the police or we can call the police. And I said, okay, you call the police, because I'm not calling the police. So they called the police, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if the police came, but after that, I didn't hear much coming from upstairs anymore. I heard maybe one or two other times I heard something, but it was never at that level again. And I figured out who the family was because I had seen the father and the child riding a bike around a parking lot outside of our patios. And the bike was too small for the child, and they were pedaling furiously. And I just kind of got the vibes from them. You could kind of tell by the way that the mother and the child were very kind of closed off, and the father was kind of brooding in his energy that, maybe things weren't so happy there. And then I happened to be running a training for work that was put on by the Women and Children's Association, or Alliance. And it was a training for child abuse prevention. And I'm an event coordinator, so I'm setting up muffins and coffee. And much to my surprise, I look at the door, and in walks this father. And I am so happy to see him there. At this point, we recognize each other. He recognizes me as a neighbor, and we shake hands. I say, I'm so glad to see you. He doesn't know that I know anything, and I don't think he really knows what the training is about. My surprise continues when at lunch he comes to me and he says, I need to pick up my child from school, and I don't have anywhere to bring them. Can I bring them here? And again, my heart just leapt. This was this child I had heard grown up. This was this child whose welfare I was concerned about. And so I said, yes, absolutely. And then my surprise continued when I wasn't participating in the training. I was in a separate room when he brings the child in and he says, can they sit in here with you while I'm in the training? And I was like, yes, absolutely. And so I get all these coloring books, and I was like, here you go, have anything you want, and I pretend to be working. But I feel like I'm with a celebrity. I'm like, there's a child here. I know this child. Oh my God, what's happening? What's going on? And they notice that there's a chessboard in the room. They're not interested in any of the things I brought out, but they ask me if I play chess. And I was like, yeah, I can play chess. And so we bring it out, and they're awful at it. They don't know anything about chess. But we learn. And they just have such a good attitude. They're so fun to hang out with. We have... They want to do a drawing competition, so we have a drawing competition of a horse, and I show them my picture, and they're like, wow, that's really good. That's a really good horse. And then they show me their picture, and it looks like a pig, and we just start laughing. And I know that child got a bike from Boise Bicycle Project this winter. Yeah. I also know that that family moved into a new home, and I've seen that family since. And I saw the child, and they asked me very lovingly how our neighborhood was doing. And so I felt like the second time around, I felt like a pawn, but it was a pawn in a different game. It wasn't a pawn in a game of retribution. It was a pawn in the slow, community healing, growing way that it takes to heal. So, thank you.
One of my favorite things is how our themes can be approached from so many different angles. Like you think, gosh, what stories are we going to hear from Pon? And the stories tonight have been absolutely amazing. And yeah, boy, it is hard to call. I mean, I grew up in a family where we were encouraged not to call the waiter over to send back the wrong order for our food. Like, you just accepted what you were served. Just eat it. Let's do one more story. I think I'm going to be saved by the last name here because the first name looks like maid to me, and I can't believe that's right. So I'm going to interpret it as maybe Matt McCarter or McCartez. Matt. Yes, good. You recognize yourself.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Nice to see you all. My name is Matt, and I have a delightful little story to tell you. But first, there are many things that make Boise an awesome place, and Story Night's one of them. So, thanks to the team. And thanks to the story so far, mine is my own, happened to me, and it doesn't have to do with peas. No peas involved at all. And just a side note on the chess piece. I taught my daughter how to play chess as she was growing up. She's in Bellingham now at school, and she hosts a chess club at her house, and she comes back to visit Christmas, Thanksgiving, and she slays me every time. So it pays off. It pays off. Attention to the kids. So here's my story. And it's a story about, I'm going to call my story Turtle Pawn. Yeah? And I'm going to share with you the worst gift ever. And the worst gift ever to give is a turtle, is a pawn. Not a pawn, but a turtle, because turtles, box turtles in particular, live forever. They live forever. And so here's where it begins. I'm at undergrad in Bellingham. Awesome town, beautiful space. The San Juans, the mountains, the mountain climbing, the mountain biking, the skiing, it was awesome. And at the time, I lived in a garage, and it was a retrofitted garage, and it was very inexpensive, which was great. And at the time, I had a girlfriend, and she had a box turtle in a little terrarium, and box turtles are about yay big, and they don't live in water. They're dry land. They drink the water, eat veg, and they just hang out. The thing about turtles, a box turtle in particular, but I guess any turtle, I can't tell if it's melancholy, missing its mother, happy, mirthful. It's really hard to tell. At any rate, my girlfriend at the time moved into an apartment down the street, right by the university, and I had a garage. She had restrictions on her apartment, couldn't host a box turtle, and she had brought it from school when she came out. So I said, hey, the turtle can live at my place. So the turtle hung at my place, little terrarium, cute little spot, fake rocks, bark, and so forth. And at the time, my little sister came to visit. And at the time, she was in high school in Spokane, where I grew up, Lewis and Clark High. And she loved my scene, loved my little garage. I outfitted it. There's tapestries and incense and bongo drums and the whole thing. It's great. Loved it. It was a beautiful time. Anyway, she was enamored by this box turtle. And so I clocked that in my head. Years go by. and she's maybe a junior in high school, and it's her birthday, and I'm like, oh, what can I give my beloved little sister Molly for her birthday? I buy her a box turtle. So she's got a box turtle. At the time, she named it Jiver, because at the time, Jim Morrison and River Phoenix were her crushes, so Jiver was the turtle. Anyway, fast forward, I moved to Seattle, she moves to Seattle, and we're there, and she still has this turtle years later. And I feel guilty because she has to tend to this turtle. You got to shave the beak, you got to clip the nails. And so I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll host the turtle for a while. We'll take a turn. So she brings the turtle over to my place. I lived at the time in a hovel little apartment on Capitol Hill, Seattle, if you know Seattle at all. And loft, 500 square feet. The kitchen was no bigger than this. So if there was two people in it, you kind of had to do a little dance. At any rate, tiny spot. So I felt very comfortable putting Jiver on the floor and letting Jiver kind of crawl around. Explore. Hey, have fun. Stretch your legs. Go for a run. Whatever. At any rate, Jiver was taking a walk, and I'd go do my thing and ignore the turtle. And I lost the turtle in my tiny little spot. And I'm like, I looked everywhere. Man, the curtains, radiator. I could not find the turtle. And I lost my little sister's turtle. I felt so bad. And I'm racking my brain. I'm like, where in the world could this little creature that's so slow, that you can't tell if it was happy or sad or depressed or whatever, where did this little guy go? And the only thing I could come up with is during the time the turtle was crawling around, there was a bag I had with some clothes and shoes that I had brought down to the Goodwill on Capitol Hill. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Could it be? Is there any way? So I'm going to pause my story here and tell you there are convergences of life that present themselves to you that if you don't milk them, you lose. And this is one of them. So anyway, I had already brought the bag down to Goodwill, donated it, lost the turtle. So I call Goodwill. And I'm like, yeah, so this may have happened, and if you could keep an eye out, that'd be great. And because I don't know where the turtle is. Name's Jiver. You won't tell if it's happy or not. So anyway, I make the call. Still can't find the turtle. A couple days later, I get a call. Mr. McCarter, that's my name. Mr. McCarter, very serious. This is Goodwill, the manager. We're going to need you to come down. I'm like, so I go down to Goodwill, and this is one of those convergences. I go down to Goodwill, and they're like, I go to a clerk, and they're like, hey, I'm Matt. Your manager called. I lost a turtle, and she looks at me like just white. Oh, hold on, sir. She goes and gets the manager. The manager's very serious. Oh, Mr. McCarter, you got to come in the back. So I go in the back where they organize all the donations, all the shoes and the clothes and so forth. And she says, you're going to need to come with me. So I go in the back. There's the manager, 3 clerks, and there's a table behind them, but I can't quite see what's on the table. And they're like, sir, I know you care about your pet. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And they open kind of like a curtain, and on the table, this folding table, is like a shellacked turtle shell purse. It's like four times the size of this little tiny turtle that I lost. This is the convergence, people. And I worked hard to play it. I was like, what? And then I just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and said, no, that's a shellac purse. My turtle was not shelled. It wasn't empty. At any rate, they had a chuckle. I had a chuckle. I bought the purse just for fun. A couple days later, I go back to my place, and I'm stretching. I'm getting rooked. Do you see this? I go back to my place, I'm stretching out, and I hear this from the kitchen, this. I pull off the plank from underneath the fridge. There's Jiver, all dust-laden. Depressed, happy, don't know. Point is, ladies and gentlemen, don't miss the little beauty convergences of your life and milk them. Thank you.
And for our podcast and radio listeners, Matt's kitchen appears to be about four square feet. I would love to see a scene where people are trying to call a turtle. Jivers, Jivers, Jivers. Come here. Oh, that's good. All right, this is the time of the show where we cue our theme song. Stories come from the land as well as its people, and I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded land of the Shoshone-Bannock people. Thank you to our season sponsor, Keenly, and our show sponsor, One Stone. Story Night, for now, is supported by public funding for the arts through the Idaho Commission on the Arts, the Idaho Legislature, and the National Endowment for the Arts. We also receive funding from the Boise City Department of Arts and History. Remember, you can listen to podcasts from all our shows or see the flagship shows on our YouTube channel. We also have a radio show. It's Story Night on Stray Theater, and that comes out the Sunday before our live show from 5:30 to 6 on Radio Boise, who's also a media sponsor. Thank you to our crew, not a long list, technical director, podcast, and video engineer, all wrapped up in one, Stephen Baldassare. Thank you to our guest musician, David Jones. Thank you to our interpreters. Thank you to our photographer, Christine Birkenbein. You'll find her photographs from tonight in an album on the Story Night Facebook page. Thank you to our volunteers, our volunteer coordinator, and story booth operator tonight, Natalia DiJosia. Thank you to our board of directors, our story subscribers, Jump, and the crew here for hosting us. And also, I may have missed my cue. I'm not sure. We'll see. Join us here at Jump next on March 25th for Night and Authentic, Inspiring, Spontaneous. So thank you. You shared your stories and you really listened. I may have come here as a stranger, but now I'm leaving as a friend. And tonight we learned, do not bring a meat thermometer to count monarch butterflies. And so the story doesn't end. See you next month for Night. Thank you so much. Thank you for telling your stories. Good night.